Whether literally or figuratively, this idea of being able to attain wealth and power and status by making a deal with the devil is based on this section of Scripture we're looking at this morning, when Jesus literally is tempted to strike a deal with the devil. This morning we're going to look at the terms of this deal. We're going to look at the temptation behind the deal. We're going to look at Jesus rejecting the deal, and finally what that means for us. But in order to set the stage this morning, I kind of like to have in my mind an image of what this might have looked like, Jesus being tempted in the wilderness by the devil. I kind of wonder what that would be like, and so I looked for a number of different images, and artists kind of have a hard time depicting the devil without it turning out cartoonish or cliché, red skin and black hair and horns and a pitchfork, big bat wings. But I did come across a couple of images that I thought were pretty interesting. The first one is kind of like an impressionist painting. You see Jesus there in the middle of the wilderness, nothing else around. There are some rocks, I suppose, but it looks like he's in prayer or in some form of meditation. He is by himself, but then you see slithering into the picture a black snake in the bottom corner. Very ominous figure, isn't it? Very reminiscent of the Garden of Eden when the ancient serpent slithered into the midst of Adam and Eve and tempted them to sin. And here comes that snake once again, coming to attack the second Adam. And just like he got the first Adam to fall into sin, he thought for sure he'd be able to get the second Adam to fall as well. Only this man was there to crush the serpent's head. I love that image in particular. And then I found another one, and this one is even more appropriate for the specific temptation that we're looking at today. You kind of, picture the devil showing Jesus all of the kingdoms of the world and all of the splendor and offering to give to Jesus all of this glory and all of them to him. And you wonder, what kind of authority would the devil have to do something like that? Well, maybe this image will kind of help explain it. You see, Jesus is pretty weak, and reasonably so at this point. He's been fasting for a month plus. He's very tired. Of course, he is the Son of God, but he did take on frail humanity. He's just like us, and he's hungry, and he's tired at this point, and he's very weak. And by contrast, you see Satan himself, depicted as an emperor, almost looking like Caesar, which is appropriate, I think, because Caesar did rule over the entire known world at the time. And also, one Caesar in particular, Domitian, he demanded that all of the subjects bow down to him and worship him as a god, just like Satan is demanding of Jesus to do here. Several times throughout the Gospel of John, Jesus refers to the devil as the prince of this world. The Apostle Paul calls him the god of this age. The Apostle John says that we are all children of God, while the entire world is under the control of the evil one. So with that image in mind, I bring your attention to our verses today in Matthew chapter 4. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. All this I will give you, he said, if you will bow down and worship me. All this I will give you if you only bow down and worship me. Those are the terms of the deal. I'll give you this. All you have to do is bend the knee. And for a long time, I kind of struggled with understanding this temptation, because obviously Jesus is not going to bow down and worship the devil. That doesn't make any sense. Why would he do something like that? But you have to realize the nature of this temptation, right? Because we don't call these polite conversations with Christ. We call these the temptations of Christ. There was something about this deal that was actually tempting for Jesus, and here's why. All of the kingdoms of the world indeed would be brought under Christ's authority. He came to earth to reclaim his kingship, but only through suffering and death and resurrection. Here, the devil is offering him a way around that. You don't have to go to the cross. I'll give you all the glory now. All you have to do is bow down and worship me. Of course, Jesus did not want to go through all of that. According to his human will, even up to the night that he was betrayed, he was begging the Father, if there is any other way, please take this cup of suffering away from me. Not my will, but your will be done. But please, if there is any other way, here the devil is offering him another way. Later on, when Jesus was telling his disciples about how he was going to be betrayed and how he was going to die this horrible death, the disciples couldn't believe him. In fact, they even told him, "No, Lord, you can't die like that." In Matthew 16, we read this, that from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. That's what I have in front of me. I have the cross standing there in front of me, and I have to go to it. You remember how the disciples replied, right? Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. "Never, Lord," he said. "This shall never happen to you." Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." And so Peter's response was, "Lord, you don't have to go to the cross. What about all that you said about your new kingdom? You are a king, and we are your subjects, and we are headed for glory." And in Peter's words, Jesus heard the voice of the tempter saying, "You can have the glory without the cross." That was the offer that the devil was making to Jesus. You can have all this without going through all that. So Jesus responded in our lesson today, "Away from me, Satan. For it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." He rejects the deal that the devil had offered. The serpent was snubbed once again. This was the third of 3 attempts to get Jesus to fall into sin, and it has failed.